You aren't bulletproof. So don't pretend that you are, because it only does a disservice to you, ultimately. You can lie and pretend that you are bulletproof, you're infallible, and you never make mistakes and you're never vulnerable, but it's not the truth. If you went into a war zone with no bulletproof vest because you just convinced yourself you were bulletproof, it's probably not the smartest thing in the world, but what you do is you equip yourself with the right equipment, the relevant equipment. In a business sense, this means not thinking, I'm never going to fail, because then when you fail, quote unquote, in the short term, you can't handle it. You've been hit when you think you couldn't. But if you've equipped yourself properly, if you wear the bulletproof vest into the war zone, if you get shot or you get hit, you don't die from it necessarily. And there's like lots of other pieces of equipment that you can wear as well. But it's like the idea is, in this life, the bad will happen as well. Bullets will come at you. You will get hit. You just have to equip yourself accordingly. And same with emotions. You can't be like, I'm never going to be sad. I'm never going to be angry. I'm never going to feel vulnerable. Because the fact is, if you convince yourself of that, when you do in fact, because factually we're made to feel those things, to have those negative experiences, because otherwise there would be no positive. Without darkness, there is no light, or without light, there is no darkness. But the idea is, it is only in the presence of the possibility of negative that positive can be true, if that makes sense. Otherwise, it would just be nothing. There'd be no negative, no positive. But we feel these things. We know this to be true, that you will go through moments of, for myself, it's anger a lot of the time. And as much as you can suppress that and be like, nah, I'm never going to be angry again. When I feel it, I just push it down. It just makes it worse. It just pops up worse and worse later, instead of equipping yourself with the skills to be able to deal with it. I have a process. I understand the pattern when I get angry, and I'm not perfect, but I can intercept the pattern as many times as possible, over and over and over again, so that it doesn't happen, instead of just suppressing it. Because suppressing just means letting it happen later, and probably worse, it just builds up that way. Same with failure in business. When you are in a position where you think, I'm never going to fail, I've seen this recently, is people start to peacock and be like, I've got all this success, this is happening, and it's like you lie about it until you can't lie about it anymore because you have nothing left. But on the outside, everyone was like, oh, this guy's doing so well, he's doing this, he's doing that. And they refuse to share the negative because it's like in their mind, they have to be this invincible, infallible, indestructible person that never experiences negatives. But we all know that that's not true. That's just not how it works. Nobody's made like that. Nobody's perfect. So it's about actually having the skills to be able to deal with that stuff. Sharing that journey, you don't have to share it all the time, like on social media, for example. Nobody wants to have that negativity constantly across them like that, but just being open about it. You can share it when it's there, that kind of thing, or when it's right to share that. The point is, you don't have to pretend that you're something you're not, because that's when it catches up to you. When you are in business, if you're like, I'm great at this skill, I'm great at marketing, for example, I'm so good, you never actually look at the faults that you have. You never look at, if I go back to the bulletproof example, if you're like, I'm bulletproof, you never look at, okay, what do I need to cover up? Where would I need to wear this bulletproof vest? What skills, going back to marketing, what skills would I need to develop to actually be good at marketing? Because if you're objectively bad, you won't get the results, and that speaks for itself. But if you keep convincing yourself, it's like if you tell yourself a lie for long enough, you'll believe it. If you tell yourself, I'm good at this, I'm good at this, I'm good at this, but the evidence all suggests that, hey, maybe you're not that good at it. And that's okay. It just means there's some bottleneck somewhere, and you've got to start with addressing that and develop the skill. Develop. But you can only get that if you have the commitment to gain the awareness, to actually realize where your deficits or your downfalls are, what you need to develop and what you need to get better at. But if you constantly tell yourself you're great at this thing, you're never going to improve. You're just going to keep doing it badly and then being like, why isn't this working? It's everyone else's fault, not mine. Quick tangent by way of that. It's like when people are failing, they tend to do one of three things. that they tend to place blame in one of three places that it's not good to do this, but they either excessively blame external circumstances or the environment, other people, or themselves. And there's a catharsis or like a good feeling that comes with that, with blaming, that stops you from changing. Because when you realize there's a mistake, it creates an open loop. And we don't like open loops as humans. It's like if someone were to say half of a sentence. Most of us can't handle that and don't want to realize that maybe there was no other half of that sentence, but like, I need you to finish what you said. It's like a prank that I pull on on a lot of my mates. It's like, I'll be talking to them, and then at the very end of the call, I'll be like, oh yeah, just remember, and they hang up, and then they call you back. And it's like, they close the loop until they understand, okay, he's playing a prank, don't do that anymore. And obviously if it's serious, I don't do that. And like the people that don't appreciate it, I don't do that too. But it's about creating an open loop. That's what happens when you notice a problem. When you're like, this is my fault. For example, the one that people do a lot is like, I'm not good at this, I suck at it. And they start beating themselves up unnecessarily. And there's a catharsis or a good feeling, a resolution that we seek when we realize there's a problem. That's normal. Like, we want to solve problems. But a lot of the time, the loop that we're stuck in, or this closed loop that we create for ourselves, is see the issue, is number one, or have that awareness. Number two is to excessively blame and beat yourself up. And as a result, we get the catharsis from that. And then we feel better, and then we repeat the behavior. That's just the nature of human beings. We close the loop that way. But if you remove blaming yourself excessively, beating yourself up, putting blame onto other people, then it's kind of like you take that power into your hands, because when you place blame, you also place power. So it's like, regardless of whose fault it is, whose responsibility is it? And at the end of the day, it's always yours. It's always yours. When you're a leader, everything is your responsibility. If that makes sense. If things go wrong down the chain, a good leader does not blame one of their workers like, it's me, because I should have had things in place to have this happen. And yeah, there are human faults in that, but it's still what you put your name to. So when you do that, you just have to realize that if you don't place that blame on anything and you just bear the responsibility, you'll start to actually do things that objectively are productive to moving in the direction that you want to be. For instance, if you realize you're bad at marketing, instead of putting the blame on, it's the client's fault or my potential client's fault, they just don't want to buy my product because they suck and they're not ready. It's like, okay, maybe there's something in my marketing, in my messaging. You bear that responsibility, then you look at what that could be and you go to resolve those skills. Similar thing with sales, and it's an issue I've run into before. I was like, I'm great at sales. I'm good at this. Like, sales, easy. That's not my bottleneck. But when my wife, Yana, and I, we sat down and she called me out on it. She was like, are you actually that good at sales? What's your closing rate? What are the objective numbers? How many calls have you had? How many sales did you get? And it was like, it's actually not that good. It was like 20% maybe, but I was doing all these things to convince myself I was. But it was that realization, that being like, yeah, okay, I'm not as good as I think I am. So I have to essentially humble myself and develop the skills. Be like, okay, I need to research these things. Because even if you watch videos, if you go into it thinking, I already know this, you're not going to take things in the same way. You have to go in with that open mind of like, okay, really listen and hear what is being said. Or really listen to what's being said, not just hear it, if that makes sense. Because if you go in and you're just like, I already know what I'm doing, I don't need to watch this sales video, and you have that mentality, but you watch it anyway, you might hear what's being said, but you're not listening, you're not taking that in. So by doing that, by having that frame in your mind of like, okay, maybe I'm not as good as I think I am, and that's okay, there's no need to beat myself up, we can always improve, then you actually go in and you develop and learn the skills. And from that, I've gotten better at sales, and I continue to get better at it, because nobody's perfect, but I'm pretty good at it now. But it only came from that awareness of, hey, maybe you're not as good as you think you are, and being lovingly called out in the right way by my wife, whose opinion I have the utmost respect for. We're business partners, we're life partners, and all of that. So it's like, because we're married. But it takes sometimes being lovingly called out to be like, hey, you're not bulletproof. You're not bulletproof. So you need to put a bulletproof vest on. Address these skills so that you can become bulletproof, if that makes sense, by equipping yourself with the necessary skills. But it has to come from you peeling back the curtain onto yourself and not trying to preserve things the way they are if you're not happy with the way things are, because a lot of us have that. It's like that feeling of, I want to do something differently because it's not good enough right now. Sip of water. And if it's not good enough right now, do something about that. Do something about the fact that it is not good enough. But a lot of the time, we say we want better consciously, but subconsciously we'll act in a way that allows us to stay the same, because subconsciously that's a lot safer. So again, I'm bringing awareness to the fact that we do that, because then if you look at yourself introspectively and you're like, do I do that? Because the worst, and just question it, because the worst that happens if you question something is if you don't do that and you question it, you're like, cool, my position's even stronger than before, I have more confidence. But if you refuse to question it, if you question it and it's not right, it'll fall apart, and then you can be like, okay, I better do something about this. You have the option to do that. But if you refuse to question it because you're scared of pulling out the rug from under yourself or questioning the basis of your reality, then it's like, how are you going to improve? You're not, because you think you're bulletproof. Coming back to that, and you will never make your life better, because subconsciously you'll seek to stay the same, because that's safer. Even though it might suck subconsciously, like your body, the worldly part of you will seek to stay the same, because that's more comfortable in the short. That's easier. That comes more naturally, because whatever you've done up until now has led you to being who you are now, and it's just easier to stay that way. And this is a realization I think a lot of people have when it comes to change, is realizing that you're going to actually be uncomfortable regardless. If you're staying the same, there will be things that you're uncomfortable with and unhappy with. But if you are changing, it's also uncomfortable. It's not like either one of those is ever comfortable fully. So it's like you might as well change and become that person that, you could look at it pessimistically and be like, okay, if it's uncomfortable anyway, stuff it. But it's like the circumstance becomes more comfortable, more fulfilling, more of what you want when you change, when you seek to change in the positive direction. And there's comfort in understanding that the success is in the journey itself, not in the destination, but in the journey itself. By trying and changing, you are successful in doing that. So that's a little tangent there. And there's a little framework for you. I've sprinkled a couple frameworks in there for you to use so that there's a practical application for all of those things. But you have to first have that awareness of you're not bulletproof, so don't pretend to be. It's okay. Even in a leadership capacity, it's like, you're not Superman. That's okay. Don't try and convince the world that you're Superman, because the only person that ultimately comes back to is you. And eventually you might believe that you're Superman and get yourself really hurt. Which is not what we want. We want to develop skills. You've got to be realistic to your current situation, what you are, and then think about where you strive to be, even if it might, quote unquote, seem unrealistic. But yeah, it might just not be common. A lot of the time, I was saying this to Yana, little tangent, we tend to use unrealistic and uncommon synonymously, but then we think, okay, this person's lying to me because they've said this thing, and no one else has done it. But it's like, it's just uncommon. It's not unrealistic. There are a lot of, anything's possible within God's will, essentially. So, yeah, that's all for that. Don't think that you're bulletproof, and use that information. Don't just sit there and sulk in, I'm not bulletproof, I wish I was bulletproof. It's not going to change just by you wishing for it to be the case. We've been made this way. So all you can do is do something about it. Develop the skills. Make your business bulletproof. in the sense that you develop the necessary skills to get you through anything, and develop the right mindset to be able to handle those things and lead your business through those situations as well. Because there will be negatives. There will be tough times. There will be good times. There'll be the in-between times as well. But it's like, you just have to see the world for what it is. See you for what you are. And embrace that. Be cool with that. It's all according to God's design. And you do that, act accordingly, and it'll be all gravy, baby. Catch you guys on the flippity flip.